So we are, as the slide says, going to be in Exodus. And again, we're treasuring who God treasures. It's our focus lesson this week, out of this session. We're surrounded by self-absorbed culture and throwaway world. A self-absorbed life is breeding ground for death and destruction. Self-absorption is evidence in the fact that we live in a throwaway world, also called cancel culture. When a person speaks something different than the approved talking points of society, he and his work are canceled. The throwaway aspect of cancel culture is even more insidious in many places. The world in which we live considers humans as throwaway. When an older person is seen as having no value, they are placed out of sight, out of mind. When a preborn human is inconvenient, may not look like we want, or will face health and development issues, his or her life is terminated. God treasures all life from the womb to the tomb. He plans a person's days before a breath is ever breathed. He does terrific things with lives of those that he would prefer to others would prefer to throw away. As an ambassador for Christ, we should treasure all that he does. In Exodus 2, we'll see a self-absorbed king of Egypt wreak havoc upon Israel because he considered them of no value. But we will also discover what God can do through those who fear him and treasure those he treasures. You have to pardon me. My eyes are reading is a struggle right now. Next week I'll have glasses. Unfortunately, I had to start that aspect. Once I get the microphones down here, I will. Okay. So, we live in a society of social media cancel. If somebody on the TV screen or somebody says something that people don't like, they create a social media campaign and cancel that person. Many people have lost their jobs and their livelihood just simply because of free speech. We were actually discussing this morning. Free speech is a treasured right we have in this country. And because of that free speech, we have the right to preach the gospel and teach the Bible the way God wants us to, without restriction. And as a result of that, though, we have to also defend the right for other people to teach their religion the way they wish and deem. Otherwise, it's not free. And that's one of the things that this talks about, we're talking about there with the throwaway culture and what God treasures. As we get into Egypt and Pharaoh, Moses, in this time frame, now mind you, we are about 300 years after Joseph going into Egypt, because the Israelites were in Egypt for about 400 years. So this is about the time that Moses is born. When he comes back to Egypt, he's 40. So this will be about 350, 360-ish years since Joseph first went since the Israelites went down into Egypt. So if you remember, when Joseph was in Egypt, the Egyptians were not allowed to sit and eat with him because he was a Hebrew. They weren't allowed to all be together and eat because they felt it was an abomination for the Egyptians to eat with the Hebrews.
Who thought that?
The Egyptians did. It was actually if you go back into Genesis, it says, that Joseph and his brothers and the Egyptians were away because they couldn't eat with him. So this was not a new thing, but it became an extreme thing by the time this Pharaoh comes in. So as we read the Bible meets life here, one man's trash is another man's treasure. The origin of this quote isn't fully known, but it was recently used by Yotam Asaf Ottolenghi, I love trying to say that one, an Israeli-born chef living in Britain. He used it to explain why some chefs believe is useless food to be thrown away is a treasure in the hands of another chef. It could be said one man's useless, inconvenient throwaway life is sacred and treasured by God. We know the stories of people like Andre Botticelli, Tim Tebow, who have accomplished much after the medical community instructed their parents to abort them. These lives are testimony to the truth that all life is treasured by God, whether it is the preborn, the inconvenient, or the only lying on a bed in a nursing home. Today we go to see what happens with a throwaway life when people step in with courage and compassion. We'll see what God can do when we step in for the sake of those who can't stand up for themselves. In our society today, this is no more prevalent. There's nothing more prevalent about this, standing up for those who can't stand up for themselves, than when we talk about pro-life and abortion. It is the most appalling ideology to just say, this birth is inconvenient, so I'm just going to dispose of it. I can't even, as much as annoying as children can be at times, as costly as I was talking with some of the guys at work earlier, and one of the guys just had a baby, and one of our single guys was like, yeah, man, I don't even want to think about doing that. And we're like, great, don't. First of all, you're single. But we all agreed there's nothing greater in this world that you get to do than be a parent. There's nothing that gives you greater joy. Nothing gives you greater heartache, but nothing that gives you greater joy than being a parent. And the idea that people so nonchalantly are willing to destroy that life is, I can't wrap my head around it. I mean, it's the most innocent of innocence. I saw a movie one time years ago, and they were having a debate on abortion. And somebody said, if you could take a newborn baby and somebody told you that you could end all hunger, all disease, cure every illness in the world, but all you had to do was take that little baby and make it suffer an unbearable death, could you do it? And everybody in the room, to a person, was, nope, couldn't do it. There's no way I could do it. But yet, we are so willing to do that with babies in the womb as a just inconvenient truth. And it's appalling. So we're going to go on here. Question number 1. When have you seen one person's trash become another one's treasure?
I sort of have an example. I mean, I just think of like junkyards and stuff. Because you have all these cars that are thrown away.
Right.
And sometimes you just need that weird part on your car that you can't really get anywhere. And sometimes that's the place you go. And,
Yeah, Sean brought up junkyards, because there's sometimes with cars, especially older cars, where there's something you need and you just can't get it. Marie has a G6 that it's a 2007, so parts are not made for it anymore. Finding parts for it has become a nightmare. And I'm sure there's going to be times where, coming into the future, where I'm going to have to do that. We actually are taking one old car that we have that's destroyed. We're having it stripped of all the parts for the convertible top so we can put them away and store them for when we need them for the new one. But yeah, Chris Bloomfeld I heard him saying this morning, his snowblower died. And when we had the first snow, well, anybody who knows Chris, he has a company called Junk Force Ohio, shameful plug. He had one of the clearouts they did, there was a snowblower in it, so he kept it. It didn't work, so he took it and had it repaired, and he got a snowblower out of it. So, one man's trash, another man's treasure.
Sometimes when it seems tedious, but sometimes when you're in a relationship or whatever, a lot of the time the ex will be like, well, it's an upgrade. Or the new partner will be like,
Yeah,
see the beauty in the person that I'm with, and
So my daughter brought up, relationships. Some people, when they look at where they've dated or who they've been with, and and then you look at your spouse and you realize that, we all are. I praise and I give. I pray for those who only ever date one person, get married, and stay together. It's the way God designed it, because that person is your treasure forever. And you never have those issues. In the realm of sports, you look at, I as a Browns fan, we talk about our quarterback scenarios. We had somebody here who we threw out in Baker Mayfield, who is a treasure in Tampa Bay. Sam Darnold was a quarterback for the Jets. They threw him away, gave him away for nothing. He just went and took the Vikings to their second best season. I think it's their second best season they ever had. Took them to the playoffs. There's so many things that we look at in this life and we say, that's garbage. But other people are like, okay. Secondhand shopping. Going to thrift stores. A lot of good clothes and stuff you can buy there that somebody else just threw out.
I think, I was thinking about that a little bit, but I think that's like, because it's interesting when you think of yourself, of other people that way, but like when you think of yourself, because there are times in life where you're rejected and
Yeah.
discarded by people, and I think like from that side of the coin, you have to kind of realize, well, one, that not everybody's gonna like you, and that's totally fine. But it's like, don't like, and I say this carefully, but like, don't invest time in the relationships where people don't value you as an individual.
True. And that's, and you know what the wonderful thing about us, regardless if somebody thinks you're trash, God sees you as a treasure.
Exactly.
And that is the most important aspect of life. When we realize that to God, and all of our frailties, all of our failings, everything we do wrong, we are still treasured by Him. And that's, when you keep that in your focus, it really changes the way you look at things. Exodus 1, 16 through 17. It'll be up on the screens. And this is Pharaoh talking to the midwives of the Hebrews. And he said, when ye do the office of the midwife to the Hebrew women, and see them upon the stools, if it be a son, then ye shall kill it. But if it be a daughter, then she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not, as the king of Egypt commanded them, but saved the men children alive. Basically, these are the women who are there to help the women have their babies. And Pharaoh said, listen, if it's a boy, kill it. But if it's a girl, you keep it alive. Why was he okay with the girls being left alive? Yeah, he didn't want to be overthrown. He knew the men were the ones who did. But why would you still allow the women, the girl children, to be born? Exactly, I can breed them.
I'm assuming part of it, I don't know, and I don't know that much about Egyptian culture, but I don't know, did the Egyptians, did they want to like assimilate?
So what would happen, it was just the same way it was here in the U.S. a lot of times. So what you would do is you would take other slaves, and you would allow them to have children, but then you would take the parent, the male, and they would be shipped off. You put them somewhere else. Because as long as you can destroy the family, you have control. Which is what the media and the world is trying to do now. By destroying the nuclear family, the government then becomes the parent to the children, and they get to control and program them. So this lesson in this section really, it plays out through history multiple times when you look at societies around the world. Question 2. Where do you see the spirit of Pharaoh on display in our culture? Yeah. Media, the governments, the control factor, the idea that they want them to be completely and 100% dependent on the government, and they're going to tell you, my mother, when I graduated high school in June of '93, and my little brother was born in September of 93. So I have a little brother who's 19 years, 2 months younger than me. When my mom found out she was pregnant, and I took her, my dad was working, so I drove her to her first OB appointment. The first thing that the OB said was, you should terminate this pregnancy. No test had been run, nothing.
What was his rationale?
Her rationale was the idea that my mother was already in her 40s. She had had difficult pregnancies before, and chances are the baby would be born with, developmental issues. Obviously, this was not an issue for us. So we immediately got up, left the office, went to another doctor who said, well, let's do the amniocentesis test, which is basically they stick a needle in, test the fluid, see if the baby's going to develop right, see if everything's good to go. Which is actually where my little brother got his name, because when the doctor put the needle in, she nicked his knee. And so my grandmother said he had to be called Nick. Ergo, his name is Nicholas. But he was fine. No developmental issues. No genetic developmental issues. Natural developmental issues were another story. But point being, that's their response. Society now, Planned Parenthood. What's their first, well, you're not married, you don't have the money, it's going to really affect your life, so just terminate the baby. Just terminate the fetal tissue, as they love to say it. That's Pharaoh. That's the devil who was in charge of Pharaoh at that point.
It was funny because, I talked to Andy about this. He's like, what they should do is they should, Times Square, all the screens, whatever, just put, a live, abortion. So that, because they pulled the wool over your eyes. Well, the part of me thinks that there'd still be people who want to get an abortion.
Yeah, because the problem is, Sean brought up, his friend Andy said that, they should blast on Times Square on all the screens a live abortion. Here's the problem. It's life. The reason that people can be so easily is because they've been convinced it's not a life yet. Because nobody wants to kill a life. So as long as it's not a life, I'm okay. So these people are just demented in this idea that it's just tissue. Harvard, I think it was Harvard, did a thing where they showed they were doing fertilization of an egg. What is it? IV infusion or
In vitro.
in vitro? Thank you.
This is outside the body?
Yes, but so what they do is they do it in a petri dish, I guess, and then they insert it into the body. But they watched it on this camera and super extreme frame, frame by frame, whatever. And as soon as the sperm met the egg, there was a blast of light. It actually generates light as soon as fertilization happens. And it's we go back to, I heard someone on the radio talking about it, and they said, it goes back to the beginning when God said, let there be light. Life begins with light. You cannot deny the fact that light is involved. When that reaction is not by accident. So it's an actual real interesting scenario.
And obviously, there's obviously the physical component, but there's also the spiritual component.
Yeah, it's a spirit that becomes. It's just that's why I struggle with. I don't understand how people can have the logic, but then I realize, you know what? They're brainwashed, they're programmed. So Exodus 1:22 through chapter 2, verse 3. And Pharaoh charged all of his people, saying, every son that is born ye shall cast into the river, and every daughter ye shall save alive. And there went a man of the house of Levi, and took a wife of the daughter of Levi. And the woman conceived and bare a son. And when she saw him that he was a goodly child, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took him in an ark of bulrushes, daubed it with slime and with pitch, and put the child therein, and she laid it in the flags at the river's bank. Why did she put him in the flags at the river's bank? This is one of those things where, as you read through it, you're like, okay, was she still trying to hide him? Was she hoping somebody was going to find him and keep him? What's the whole point of this? I believe that she was hoping that an Egyptian would find him and raise him up in their house as a servant, so that he would still live. But yeah, the Bible isn't like really clear. Who finds him is strictly God ordained. I mean, there's no way around that. Because, we'll get into that in a second. How have you seen God use others to protect human life? Question 3. Think you're policemen. You're firefighters. How often do you see people run into a house? I mean, when a house is burning, what's the first thing they tell you to do? Get out. But, you look at a firefighter, they run in. In the service, one of the things about being in the military, especially in the Marine Corps, I can speak to is the fact that, we're not taught to run away from the gunfire. We're trained to run into the gunfire. And the reason you do that is to protect everybody who's behind you. You read stories, you'll hear stories about mothers. I remember a few years back there was a woman who was shot and killed by people breaking into her house. And when the police got there, she was laying in front of she was blocking a closet door. And her children were inside the closet. That's protecting life. I think of the people who, even though it's going to be 0 degrees, will stand outside an abortion clinic over the next 2 days, and protest and preach and show the love of God. I think of, people who donate their organs when they die. Those are all ways in which we see people protect life on a regular basis. Exodus 2, 4 through 10. This is funny to me because my sister always had a comment on this one. And his sister stood afar off to wit what would be done to him. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to wash herself at the river, and her maidens walked along by the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the flags, she sent her maid to fetch it. And when she had opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the babe wept. And she had compassion on him, and said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then said his sister to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and call thee a nurse of the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for thee?" And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Go." And the maid went and called the child's mother. And the Pharaoh's daughter said unto her, "Take this child away, nurse it for me, and I will give thee thy wages." And the woman took the child and nursed it, and the child grew. And she brought him unto Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she called his name Moses, and she said, "Because I drew him out of the water." My sister always said it was, if I had been in the ark, the crocodiles wouldn't have eaten me either. You got to remember, this is the Nile. We're not talking, some little back creek.
I think, I was just listening to you read this, and one of the things that kind of struck me is that, obviously, Pharaoh, of course, makes this decree, kill all these children and stuff
Right.
like that. And then you have Pharaoh's daughter, right? And it's like, it's interesting, like even Pharaoh's daughter, just kind of because, God just writes on her heart, right? Knew that just to kill this child was not right.
Yeah.
Just it's kind of that, you see this baby and, you know that it's valuable. You just, your emotions and your motherly instinct that God put, in that person.
Well, it's always, you're right. And Sean brought up, the fact that as soon as Pharaoh's daughter saw this child, her natural instincts took over, and she knew to protect it. You know, I always laugh. One of the things I always think about the story is Pharaoh never killed a baby.
Personal,
Yeah, he made everybody else do it for him. Much easier to do it that way.
of course.
You know, and you're right. Pharaoh's daughter, her natural instincts that God put on her heart, took over to cherish a child, an innocent life. You know, this child had never done anything to Pharaoh. He wasn't a threat. So when we look at this story, the idea of preserving life and treasuring what God treasures, you know, Jesus, you know, suffer the little children to come unto me. You have to come unto him as a child. And that doesn't mean as a little kid you have to be a kid. It just means with that innocence. You know, I look at the kids around this building and, you know, they have their innocence of the world is precious. You know, they don't have we tell them stay little as long as you can because the stress of age is brutal. Question number 4. Who has been an example to you in the way they treasure human life? Can you think of somebody who's that example? Somebody who you look at and you're like, yep, they treasure life. My mom was that way. My mom, you know, I mean, the way she was with my brother, she had 3 miscarriages, you know, between my oldest sister and my youngest sister. And it was, you know, it tore at her for years. You know, I think of families who adopt, you know, I think they save children out of, you know, orphanages and horrible situations. Yeah. You know, and again, women who, in today's society, who it would be easier for them to have an abortion, but don't.
You know what I find is oftentimes very fascinating is that, like, it seems like and again, I don't know the statistics on this number, but, like, you know, you look at women who, like, you know, let's say they want to get an abortion because, like, you know, I don't want to deal with this, whatever, and then, like, someone, like, presents, well, you know, you can give this up for adoption, like, afterwards. Let's say they do make the hard choice to, like, they make the hard choice, like, you know, to keep the child.
Right.
You know, it seems like 9 times out of 10 they end up keeping it, raising it themselves. Like, they don't give it up for adoption. Like, it's like, it's,
When when a woman is giving a child up for adoption,
and I could be wrong about
no, the most important thing when a woman is giving a child up for adoption is that she never holds the child. It's the most important part of it. When they put that baby in your arms for the first time, and you realize, A, you created it, B, it's half you, there's a love that God puts in every one of us that cannot be taken away. And it's brutal. You know, I jokingly tell men who are having their first daughter, get ready for the back pain. Because she's going to wrap you around her little finger and you're going to be twisted. Because for men, our daughters are, you know, daddy's little girl. And it's the other way for boys and moms, you know, mom. So it's once they're in your arms, your whole life changes. When you realize there's something in this world that you are responsible for, that your life now has become about this being, it becomes, you know, it's powerful. So yeah, women who can give their baby up for adoption because they know it's a better life and give it to somebody who can raise it and give it the life it deserves, is a wonderful thing. I have cousins who have adopted multiple children. I think of Seth and April. You know, it's a wonderful thing when you can give children a life they could not have had in their natural cultures. So when we look at these things and we start looking at life, which is God's most treasured gift to us. I mean, our life is our most is without our life we have nothing. You know, God treasures us. He treasures His creations. So the question is as you look forward into the next year of 2025, you know, how can we, you know, question number 5 is, how can our group help protect and preserve life in our church and community? What can we do to help protect life? Well, every year our church does the thing with Cornerstone Pregnancy Centers, where we collect the bottles up. You know, that's once a year. Nothing stops us from going onto their website, finding out things they need, giving them more. There are a couple of Christian groups out there who take money and they use it to, when a woman is considering an abortion, all they do is offer them a free ultrasound. Because once you see the shape of a baby and you hear the heartbeat, you can't deny it's a life. You know, Brenda's saying that's with Kyler. You know, I mean, it's amazing when, you know, when my ex-wife was pregnant with Gwen, and I got to go in and, you know, see the ultrasounds and everything, and that was just right at the time when 3D ultrasounds were starting to come out. Used to be, you know, they just give you these little pictures. So we actually got this disc of a 20-minute ultrasound. And I think we watched it probably 10 times. And all it is her moving around and heartbeat. That's it. You know, but it was, as a parent, realizing that was my child, you know, it's different. The question is, why are we not like that with other people, though? They're still God's creation. God loves those babies. You know, I have a gentleman who's Catholic, and we were discussing abortion. And I said, he goes, I just don't know, anybody can be religious and support abortion. And I said, you know, my problem with it is, as one of the things we have and that we believe, I know I believe it, I believe we as a church do, every baby that's aborted is in heaven. Automatically. They're an innocent life, it was taken, they had no chance of getting saved, but they were, you know, they never reached the age. But those are lives. Under some religious beliefs, those babies do not get to go to heaven because they were never baptized. Struggle with that one. I don't know how you can wrap your head around that. I really don't. That's a, you know, one of those really hard, you know, I mean, you take a child that, you know, there was an article in the paper, well, not paper, I say paper, but I do all my papers online, so let's be honest here. And they were talking about a man and a woman and their baby. They were on their way home from the hospital after the baby was born. They were hit by a tractor trailer. Everybody in the car died. Well, according to some beliefs, that baby doesn't get to go to heaven because it never got baptized. That's nuts.
Yeah, It's interesting, I know like the Catholic Church historically would teach that like you kind of went to like limbo, or like they had some, it wasn't that they would go to hell, so to speak, but like. and
They
of
get stuck
course,
in the Gulf unless somebody pays enough money and prays enough to get them out.
I don't know. All I know is it's wacky.
Yeah, and it's much easier for me to read the Bible and say, to be absent of the body is to be present with the Lord. Done. And that's the way I look at it with anybody who doesn't have the ability to accept Christ. I mean, people who are mentally retarded, people who just don't have the ability to make that decision. So as we look forward into this year, and we start to establish what is important to us, let's make sure that what's important to us and what we treasure are the things that God treasures. If we're treasuring the things that God treasures, we're going to have better worship, and we're going to have a heart that loves God. If we treasure things that God does not treasure, well, it's the opposite. There's no middle ground. You don't get to stay in the middle and treasure what God does, but still, love the world. It doesn't work that way. So, as we move forward, make sure that we want to protect and love and treasure those near us. Or else you're not doing what God has instructed us to do. When God says love your neighbor as yourself, he meant everybody. Everybody is your neighbor. There's no middle ground. So let's go forward this week, this month, this year with the idea that we're going to try to find new ways to help protect the innocent more than anything else. It is the job of society is to protect and care for those who can't do it to themselves. So yeah, let's pray, and we're going to finish up. I want to go over and try to help start setting up the fellowship hall a little bit for the pasta bar today. So, dear Lord, we thank you for this day. Thank you for this lesson. Thank you for treasuring us. Lord, I pray that you'd put in our hearts to love those who deserve our love because you love them, Lord, and to protect those who can't protect themselves, and to, Lord, I pray that you just be with us, keep us safe this day, be with Pastor as he brings the message and the missionary tonight. In your name, amen.